Good day to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our tropical weather outlook video for today, Monday, July 28th, 2025. Happy Monday. Happy beginning of a new week. Let's start off today by talking about development in the Pacific because there's a lot of it going on right now, especially in the Central Pacific. We now have Hurricane Iona or Iona. I'm not sure how you exactly pronounce it, but it's one of those two. And we now have a new tropical depression right behind it, all in the Central Pacific Basin right now. Tropical Depression 2C, and obviously with Hurricane Iona, of course, maximum sustained winds are at 75 miles per hour. Minimum central pressure at 994 millibars. Is located at 10.7 north and 150.1 west, and it is moving west at 10 miles per hour. And this might actually become a decently strong system compared to yesterday when I said that it probably will not become a strong system. Well, now I take that back. Iona is now pretty decently strengthening, and it probably could become a Category 2 hurricane. I think the current official National Hurricane Center forecast is for this to become a Category 2 hurricane. And I even wouldn't be surprised if this tries to make a run for major hurricane status. So we might actually have a major hurricane here in the Central Pacific very soon. Obviously, nothing in the way of major threats to Hawaii, though. So if you are worried, if you are in Hawaii in the first place and you're worried about any major threats from any of these systems, I'm here to tell you, luckily, you should not be worried, at least for now. And then obviously we have Tropical Depression 2C, which formed today, and this was actually something that really quickly developed and became a system this morning. Maximum sustained winds right now at 35 miles per hour, minimum central pressure at 1,008 millibars. We also have Invest 98E, which could potentially develop as well as it heads into the Central Pacific. And we have another area closer to the Mexican coastline. This has a 40% chance of development within the next 48 hours and a 90% chance of development within the next week. So this is very likely to develop too. And I believe that this just now got tagged as Invest 99E, because this is 98E and this is still within the Pacific area of interest, because the Eastern Pacific Basin technically counts as being west of 140 degrees west, and the Central Pacific is to the east of that. So both of these areas are still in the Eastern Pacific area of interest. This is 98E, and this is now 99E. And the Pacific is active, very active right now, producing a lot of activity. And I'll show you that on the satellite imagery. This is a satellite imagery specifically of the Central Pacific. And this shows you very clearly we have now Hurricane Iona here in the Central Pacific. A very nice organized storm, has very nice banding, and also has a well-developed outflow too. And then you could also see just to the northeast of that, very, very small Tropical Depression 2E, or 2C, I should say, since this is in the Central Pacific. And this could also potentially strengthen into a tropical storm as well, taking probably the next name on the Central Pacific naming list. And then obviously back to the east here, you can see there's also a nice spinny area here, a spinny cloudy area. This is Invest 98E. That's further back to the east here. And obviously nowhere near as organized as these two systems are, because this is definitely dealing with quite a bit of shear, probably from all of the outflow. From what you could see is lots of convective activity right now in the Central Pacific, and I'll show you as to why in a moment, and I'll show you as to why it's also helping contribute to the development of all these storms in the Pacific right now. But there is 98E, and then back to the east there's also the precursor for 99E, which will probably very likely develop as well in the coming days in the Eastern Pacific. I'll zoom in for you on Hurricane Iona, and you can see definitely an organized system. In fact, with these convective bursts, you can see that they're curling and trying to wrap around. And in fact, I looked at microwave imagery earlier, and this already has a pretty well-developed core of the system. So this is definitely a strengthening storm right now, probably on its way to strengthening and probably becoming a decent hurricane In fact, I'll show you the National Hurricane Center track. It continues on a westward motion, so once again, those in Hawaii, you don't need to worry. And this will probably continue to strengthen into a hurricane in the coming days. National Hurricane Center, once again, has this peaking at 100 miles per hour, roughly around there, as of the 11 a.m. Eastern Time advisory, and that's the 5 a.m. Hawaiian Standard Time for them. So for them, this advisory is as of 5 a.m. Hawaiian Standard Time. This is going to become a hurricane, and once again, just because of how quickly this is developing, especially compared to yesterday, I said that this probably will not become a very strong storm. Looks like I was wrong on that, and in fact, this might even once again have a shot at becoming a major hurricane very briefly here over the next several days, and it heads to the west and then eventually slightly on a west-northwest path, continues in the central Pacific, and then eventually starts to get into the western Pacific too, because it crosses the 180-degree line, and beyond that is the western Pacific. So this might be one of those rare, not completely uncommon, it happens from time to time, but it is somewhat rare, systems that develop in the central Pacific. Sometimes in the eastern Pacific, we have really, really long track storms develop in the eastern Pacific, make their way through the central Pacific, and then make it into the western Pacific. This might as well make it into the western Pacific, and if this is still a hurricane strength by the time it does that, it would then be called Typhoon Iona, but obviously the National Hurricane Center by that time already expects this to be weakening and only a tropical storm by the time it crosses into the western Pacific. But very interesting that it might do that. Certainly will help probably rack up a few ace points for the Pacific Basin as a whole. And then obviously this is the track for Tropical Depression 2C, which is just to the north of Iona. And this as well, as very obvious, will not impact Hawaii. So once again, just trying to point it out there. If you are in Hawaii, you won't need to worry about any impacts from any of these tropical systems, except for maybe some swells and surf that might be emanating from these storms. But any direct impacts, well, I guess you could say surf and rip currents is a direct impact in a way, but you get what I mean. Like heavy rain, gusty winds from any of these systems, nobody in the Hawaiian Islands will see anything from that from either of these systems. And as you can see that with the track of Depression 2C, going to continue on a westward track, maybe dip slightly southwest over the coming days, and only briefly strengthen to a tropical storm before by the end of the week already weakening, and then probably by the end of the week this will be dissipated and we won't have to worry about this storm anymore. But why do we have so much activity right now in the Pacific, especially in the Central Pacific? Literally, the Central Pacific is on fire, and the reason why that is because of this map. This is the velocity potential right now for the entire globe, and sometimes I like to bring up velocity potential, and that pretty much represents do we have rising motion and favorable upper level conditions in the atmosphere for tropical development. And right now in the Pacific, you could see we have a lot of these very green positive anomalies for rising motion in the Pacific right now, meaning atmospheric conditions are favorable. We actually have an MJO pulse moving through the Central Pacific right now, and the Pacific in general, which is going to contribute and is contributing already to lots of activity there. And obviously that'll help contribute to more development, not just in the Central Pacific, but the Eastern Pacific as well in the coming days. And I'll show you the Euro ensembles in just a moment to show you that. But this is going to continue to move eastward, probably going to help in terms of keeping the atmosphere favorable in the Pacific for the foreseeable future, and obviously is definitely aiding in the development of the tropical systems we have right now in the Central Pacific and probably in the Eastern Pacific soon. And I'll show you that with the velocity potential forecast. This is from the European, and you can see these positive green anomalies here very strongly in the Pacific right now, and they'll continue to move eastward over the next several days. And as we head into the early few days of next month of August, we'll continue to move into the Eastern Pacific, So at least for the next week or so, the Pacific will be favorable and we'll probably see lots of development there. And then eventually this begins to slide into the Atlantic. And so, as I say, as we get into the month of August, we'll have to start watching the Atlantic too for potential development. Nothing too significant right now in the models. A few days ago, we obviously had something that was pretty significant with a model signal of potentially some development in the MDR. Obviously, that has since dropped or is not as significant. But again, we're getting into early August. Conditions generally become more favorable in the Atlantic. So we'll then have to watch to see if anything does end up happening. And then eventually, this rising cell moves into the Indian Ocean, and that also kind of helps as well the Atlantic too, with producing lots of tropical waves from Eastern Africa. So we're definitely seeing a change of pattern. And it's definitely manifesting itself right now in the Eastern Pacific and the Pacific as a whole. And I'll show you that here with the European ensembles. This is through the next 10 days. This is of the 0Z run from today from the European ensembles. And just look at how much activity occurs in the Pacific. We have obviously Iona, then we have another system, and then we have another thing right behind that here in the Eastern Central Pacific. And then we have all of this activity as well. That comes from Central America into the Eastern Pacific, and then just a continuous stream of just more low pressures here that show up on the European ensemble. So lots of activity occurring in the Pacific right now. Wouldn't be shocked if we get a couple of named storms, maybe even a handful of hurricanes as well, obviously Iona being one of them. Then we'll probably get another hurricane to develop here, or maybe something like that in the Eastern Pacific, and then probably another 2 or 3 named storms on top of that. So we're probably going to end out the month in the Pacific very active, probably going to get a few extra named storms, and then probably an active start to the month next month for them as well. And then meanwhile, just to show you really quickly with the 12Z GFS, how are things shaping up in the Atlantic right now? Still not much yet. Obviously, it seems like at least over the next week or so, the MJO pulse and the favorable rising velocity potential anomalies will be mostly felt in the Pacific. Really doesn't seem like it starts until early August in the Atlantic. And so obviously, until then, things are still kind of quiet. Although a little bit of an interesting thing that you see here appearing off the southeast coast around 7 days out. And there have been a few hints at that on the models, including the GFS and also the European ensembles too. So we'll see if something happens, obviously. And then just really quickly, you could see quite an aggressive tropical wave here. And this is actually associated with the very aggressive tropical wave that's coming off the coast of Africa now. And I don't have to show you on satellite imagery because I'm pretty sure, especially if you are on Twitter, you probably saw about it because a lot of people were tweeting about it, including me, especially yesterday. There was a very aggressive wave that came off the coast of Africa. And that actually was the wave, I believe, that a lot of the models were very aggressive in showing some development of as we went into the central and western MDR as we began the month of August. But obviously now you don't have anything that actually tries to consolidate. I mean, you do see here, at least on the vorticity of the GFS, quite a decent vorticity signature. That's definitely a strong tropical wave, but obviously as we head into the next week, does not consolidate into anything further and actually become a tropical system. So for now, the Atlantic still remains quiet. It probably will continue to remain quiet over the next week, which is obviously good. And for now, all the development we are tracking is in the Pacific, especially the Central Pacific, as it is on fire right now, as I have on the title card. And it probably will continue to stay that way as well for the next week. With that being said, I'm going to end off today's video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, as I always say, please take some time to like this video, comment as well any thoughts you have, and any questions you have as well. I'll definitely be able to try to answer them as soon as possible, so please comment those below. And subscribe to the channel. It's free. Obviously, everything on YouTube is pretty much free, except if I ever decide to do a channel membership, then you'll have to pay for that. But subscribing is free, so please make sure to do that. And also share this video as well with others, especially those that you think might find this kind of information useful and interesting. So please make sure to do all that. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. I, of course, will be back with more tomorrow.